Well, good evening, folks. It's kind of a quiet one tonight. Not many customers in store again. You have to wonder on a Friday night, where are people if they aren't here choosing to make it a Blockbuster night? Ugh, it is really the decline right now. Now, you remember last shift, I delighted and entranced you with all the tales of those sterling corporate policies that doomed Blockbuster? That was the internal threat, where the call was very much coming from inside the house. Today, in this shift, I want to cover the other side of that, the external threats. And let's complete the picture in discussing what killed off Blockbuster.
There is no doubt Blockbuster has the most fantastic selection of VHS and DVDs, and please make it a Blockbuster night. Wow, what a difference. Now you can rent the new Barbie movie if you're feeling the energy, or rent a bundle of Fight Club, American History, and Moonrise Kingdom if you fancy a Norton night in. Remember, Blockbuster is top. Blockbuster is modern technology.
As I was saying, let's talk about what killed off Blockbuster. Before we get into the main gimmick of this shift, there is a small but I feel important issue that's often very overlooked, so I think we should discuss it, and that is the format wars. Now, not Betamax, we aren't touching that. Someone else can talk about Betamax, I'm not going there. Now, do you remember in the second shift I was talking about the VHS revolution, how that technological innovation created the opportunity for Blockbuster to grow and for video stores to spring up everywhere? Well, that was all grand. You remember they got that 8,000 titles in that first store, yeah? That huge variety that they had that enabled them to play the long tail strategy and win that way. If you can't find what you want among 8,000 titles, your interests are pretty darn niche. Now that was all fine and dandy until 1997, when DVDs arrived commercially. And this is, by the way, very much in my living memory. This really kicks off the old nostalgia, because I remember that every VHS that I rented or bought in the mid to late 90s, it had this advert on talking about the supremacy of DVDs over inferior formats. You remember this one?
This is what happens when you watch DVD. It's a movie on a disc the size of a CD. The picture is twice as sharp as VHS. The sound is infinitely clearer. It looks and sounds like you're at the movies, but you can experience it at home. Not to mention, you can watch it in widescreen. Pick your language. Choose from many additional features. Watch a movie right on your computer. And rent or buy DVDs created by these great Hollywood studios. DVD. See how good a movie at home can be.
Damn, that was some concentrated 90s right there. I think we've all had our RDA of nostalgia just watching that. And that ad always cracks me up. It's always ridiculous because they're going on about the crystal clear picture quality you only get on DVD, whilst on VHS. If we can only see it on DVD, you can't show us that on VHS. It makes no sense. It's always been silly. And also, the way it says that you can only get widescreen on DVDs. Please, please. Here is my 1997 copy of Scream in widescreen. Thank you very much. It does have Billy with a mustache on it that he never has in the film. Kind of annoying, kind of weird, but don't hold that against it. Anyway, I'm kind of nitpicking. The improvement in picture quality is, of course, welcome. It does make a difference. You're going on DVDs with about 480p to 720. Very welcome improvement on VHSs, which were about 240 to 360 as standard, just for your comparison there. Now, this is the 1080p that we're all comfortable with and is standard on Blu-ray, although obviously we'll note that you can get DVDs in 1080p, although it takes up a lot more space on the disc. I hope that comparison is helpful to you. Go away now, go, shoo. Now, that improvement in picture quality is very welcome. You might be wondering, how the heck could you watch a whole movie in 360p? Well, back then, the TVs were a lot smaller in 1997, so, you know, it didn't matter as much. It's quite glaringly obvious now, but in 1997, it wasn't as bad. And that jump from 360 to 480, you know, it's nice, but it's not crucial. I'm not trying to do it down. I'm just trying to put it in perspective. Of course, the other area that DVD shone was all the extras, which, you know, awkwardly VHSs would just like shove on the back after the film, because where else are you going to put them? But they were a major selling point. There's then like an industry-wide change to entice you to buy the DVD to spend a lot more on it because of the extras. And I was a big fan of this, even though I've got to say I felt that not many films actually took advantage of this to the full. Lord of the Rings, notable and welcome exception. But I'd say it's still not fully utilised, especially in the area of audio commentaries, which tend to be quite bland, quite a sort of low energy actor just sort of saying, oh, this person was great to work with and gosh, it was so cold on set that day, freezing. Can't relate. Audio commentaries take up almost no space on your disc. There should be loads of them and they should be much higher quality, an opportunity for insightful film analysis. You know, that is, it's why I try and make my own contribution to that area. Although I will say notable shout out to Shout Factory, who really do put in the effort when it comes to the extras and especially the commentaries. The sheer number of them, there's going to be a gem in there. So Shout Factory, absolute stars. I digress.
DVD. Yeah.
Anyhow, all that DVD talk is because the arrival of DVD presented a massive problem for Blockbuster and it sabotaged them. The dilemma was, if you've got a film available in two formats, what do? Do you just keep it on VHS only and then alienate DVD owners so they won't rent from you? Or do you stock both and thereby take up shelf space with effectively duplicates of the film, thereby reducing the selection you could offer? Do you cause chaos by having it on DVD only and some things only on VHS? It's a nightmare for stocking your video catalogue. And then it gets even worse because you've got the additional formats of Blu-ray and HD DVD arriving. And you've also got then games consoles and a whole bunch of games in stock as well, because you're trying to rent those out. And then just to exacerbate it, just to really put the cherry on the cake here, you have a CEO like Bill Fields who decides that when you come to Blockbuster, you know what you're really after? You're after Yankee Candle, stuffed toys, and a Jennifer Page album. You know, all of those things are fighting for your shelf space, and it's just a little crushed, you know? Franchise owner Alan Payne, he was faced with this dilemma obviously, and he decided very early on he was going all in on DVD. He just switched over his whole collection really early, sold off all the VHSs, fairly cheap to fund that switch. But for Blockbuster itself, that is a much tougher problem. You've got thousands and thousands of stores with thousands and thousands of tapes. We're talking multiple millions of films about which you have to make a decision. Therefore, the mass and scale of the corporate-owned Blockbuster stores really inhibited them, made the problem even worse. So you can see why it was a problem. That threat to the total number of films you could offer, that is effectively sabotaging your long tail strategy, your ability to offer the widest range of films, that key advantage. It's in the toilet. That is the format wars, and that's why I raised it. I hope you can see why. Now, moving on from that, we'll talk about the main focus of this video, which is the external threats to Blockbuster. Now, Blockbuster was a healthy, strong corporation. It had some pretty strong stats, but it lost the fight. So we have to ask ourselves, what did it lose to? So preemptively, I should say, I'm basically writing off all the other video stores, or I should say movie rental store competitions like Hollywood Video, Video Central, Family Video, all of those. I'm just kind of writing them off because Blockbuster, with its ruthless executive team and big business scale, it just destroys Hollywood Video on brand power, price point, costs, and even efficiency. That is, even though you still need to physically go to both, Blockbuster was a quicker service and more likely to have what you needed, as well as being more likely to have a store near you. That's how it manages to beat out all the competition, as we've already covered. But what you might not expect is competition from Walmart. Many Blockbusters were located inside Walmarts and similar big box stores. Just as Domino's or Pizza Hut would often lease a small part of a Blockbuster store, Blockbuster aimed to be a convenient part of a trip to Walmart. I wonder if any of the Blockbusters inside Walmarts had Pizza Huts with them. That's getting a bit matryoshka, isn't it? Anyway, those big stores wanted a slice of that very profitable video rental pie. And initially, the high cost of VHS and later DVD engineered the perfect price point for rental to claim the optimum price point. People wanted to watch movies on VHS, but not pay $80 to own one, hence rental being king. With technology, pioneers buy early at a high cost, with mass adoption only ever following mass production when the scale of production has incorporated enough efficiencies to lower the price point. When this mass scale of production imposed itself on VHS and DVD, Walmart was able to lower its price point and threaten Blockbuster. Suddenly, the cost to own a film on DVD with a full range of extras was only $5 or $10 more than renting that film on a rental copy with only limited extras from Blockbuster. Later, Walmart would further eat away at Blockbuster's customer base with their bargain bins, the movie equivalent of a cheeky Greggs. Why gamble on a rental when there's a $4 film right there, right next to you as you wait by the till, next to the Mars bars at grabbable height for children? Walmart had higher costs than Blockbuster, but it could effectively match them on price point. And while it was absolutely a lower quality experience, it was more convenient in many ways. If you picked up a movie in Walmart, you didn't need to make a separate trip. As long as Blockbuster could keep a lower price point and provide a better selection and service, they wouldn't be taken down by what is effectively a sideline of Walmart. But Netflix represented a very different threat to Blockbuster because it had a very different business model. Netflix was founded in 1997, the year DVDs were commercially available, by Reed Hastings, and he's still the CEO. And Netflix had two major innovations that gave them a competitive edge over the much bigger, much more established Blockbuster. The first is that because Netflix was originally just an online DVD by post business, that is, customers could sign up and order a DVD to be sent to them by mail, they realized that they didn't need to spend a whole load of money on very expensive property to warehouse all their inventory. They realized that they can actually have most of their inventory out in the field in customers' homes. That is, say, if they had 1 million films on DVD, they only needed to pay to store, maybe a third of that, because they banked on most of it being out rented to customers. That saves them a heck of a lot of money. The other innovation that they had, the other big advantage over Blockbuster, is that they didn't have the rental periods with due dates and late fees, which is a lot of admin. It annoys customers. Instead, their business model is based on subscription. You had different levels of subscription, which were really just based on how many films you could have out at any one time. Really, you kept them as long as you wanted, and then you posted them back when you're done with them. You send a film you've received back, and a few days later, you'll receive the next one that you want. Totally different model. This way, Netflix didn't need to rent a title a certain number of times to make money or bring customers back to the store repeatedly. They just had to keep the customer interested and still subscribed. A member who only gets one film is no problem for Netflix. It's a disaster for Blockbuster. They worked around the DVD supply issues that plagued Blockbuster by having customers fill out a long list of movies they were interested in and suggesting more to those customers via an algorithm. This algorithm for suggesting movies was another innovation that really helped Netflix, and its name was Cinematch. The trick was that by having a large list of potential rentals, Netflix would ship out what was available. They never had to give everyone the newest, hottest movie, and people didn't expect it. They just sent out what was in stock. It's a very different experience to Blockbuster, and it played to Netflix's strengths. Personally, back in those days when we had Love Film in the UK, that was our equivalent of Netflix, I used to really enjoy receiving the DVDs by post. I'd love the surprise of whatever turned up. And you also got taught a really valuable lesson in stated versus revealed preference, thanks to Netflix or Love Film, in that, you're feeling so sophisticated and highfalutin when you're making your film selection and you add Yentl to the list. But when that's all you've got on a Friday night and you really fancy the long kiss goodnight, you don't feel so smart. Very valuable lesson. Now, just like Blockbuster, what Netflix was doing there was using technological innovations that gave them a major advantage in the contemporary market. So back in the day, 1985, let's say, Blockbuster was using the electronic tagging, it was using the innovative logistical powerhouse of the distribution center to help it win the territorial battle. We remember that, that's what they were doing. But Netflix, it could never beat Blockbuster in a territorial battle, but they innovated so that physical store presence just wasn't necessary to them. Pre-internet, Netflix would never have worked. It would never have been able to compete with Blockbuster like that. But the technological conditions arrived, and then Netflix capitalized on them. However, having said all that, it doesn't mean that every lazy hack who blames Blockbuster's demise on Netflix entirely is correct. Absolutely not. Remember, this whole series is to fight that notion. Blockbuster actually had some mega advantages over Netflix. Let's talk about some of them. For one, the quality of service. Going into Blockbuster was an actually pleasant experience in the store. It was nice. Netflix cannot offer that. As nice as it is to receive mail you want, it's not on the same level. The other sort of huge disadvantages that are part of the Netflix model are the delays. You know, there is a delay absolutely necessitated by that model where someone watches their film, posts it back, and then has to wait for Netflix to send them the next one on their list. You know, that is a minimum 2 to 3 delay in between watching different films. You know, that would be very frustrating, whereas Blockbuster, drive to the local store, pop in, swap over that night. Easy. The other major disadvantage that Netflix had was the lack of choice over what you received. So remember that Netflix may have mastered the long tail selection by having basically everything you could possibly think of. But, you know, okay, they've got Ran, they've got Ikaru, they've got Cannibal Holocaust, they've got Katy Perry's Part of Me. Wonderful, what a great selection. But you didn't control what Netflix sent you. In fact, Netflix would even punish heavy users by a practice known as throttling, which was basically sending them titles mostly from the bottom of their list. I guess the theory was, you know, you put Yentl on there because you felt real classy, but you're never going to be that enthusiastic about it. So you sit on it for a while and you're less likely to sort of be swapping DVDs out daily. So very, very clever strategy. Now, your plans for a highbrow Kurosawa night are basically buggered when Netflix sends you Cannibal Katy Perry Cost. Underrated combo, by the way, better than Barbenheimer. Franchisee Alan Payne takes a similar stance in his book. Blockbuster should have competed on quality, speed, and selection, not on price. Payne also describes the 2 times Blockbuster had the option to buy Netflix and declined to, both under John the Horse Guy Antioco. You've likely heard about the first one, in which Netflix actively sought to be bought by Blockbuster for $50 million. Reed Hastings wanted to focus on synergy and have them work on different parts of the market, but Antioco rejected it outright, viewing Netflix as unsustainable. It's a baffling decision, especially given the steady growth in the DVD market as the public gradually switches over from VHS. Instead of spending lots on replacing its back catalogue of older movies with DVD copies, Blockbuster could have just accessed Netflix's stock and only bought newer titles for their stores. The second time that Netflix discussed a buyout was during the Total Access debacle that we discussed in 2004-2005, when Netflix offered a price of $200 for each of their 3.5 million subscribers, or $700 million in total. And once again, John the Horse Guy Antioco refused because he believed that Blockbuster could win the war of attrition against Netflix. Alan Payne, one of my favourite sources of course, considers at the moment that Blockbuster could have been saved. They could have paid a very steep price, but gained a strong cash flow from it, a new inventory, and a better customer insight algorithm, and positioned itself for the next stage of movie rental. streaming movies online. Now, this is all happening, of course, before Netflix ever streamed a movie. That would happen 2 years later in 2007. Now, I don't exactly agree with Alan Payne here because I see things from a very different perspective. If you remember in previous shifts, I distinguished between Blockbuster, the company, the corporation, and Blockbuster as an experience, the home movie rental experience. Now, I think buying Netflix either of those times could absolutely have saved Blockbuster, the company, but it doesn't do anything to save Blockbuster, the experience, that feeling of eagerly anticipating a trip to the video store as a treat, of browsing the aisles, holding the films in your hand, and the joy of taking home a big stack ready for a cozy movie night. That is a very tactile experience, and it's not going to be saved by buying out Netflix, and more on that in the final episode. Now, I'm going to talk about the final competitor now, which is an oddball, but it's still very worth considering, and that is DVD kiosks. Redbox is the premier brand of these, but others are still very much in the picture. Chiefly, DVD Express, certainly for our purposes, looking at the early days of that technology. Now, DVD Express, they are vending machines, but renting DVDs and doing so very, very cheaply, you can understand why no property rental costs and almost no staffing costs whatsoever. So they've got that as a massive advantage. But DVD Express, it had a rocky start. In September 2001, the founder was due to agree a lease to run a pilot scheme in a prestigious Manhattan location. But unfortunately, another pilot scheme stopped him. The next trial, naturally, was in McDonald's, of all places, which went a tad swimmingly and proved the concept could work. So in 2001, DVD Express met with Blockbuster to discuss a merger, and John, the horse guy Antioco, killed the deal. While DVD Express, Redbox, etc. obviously can't compete on movie selection because their space inside each one is very limited, the vending machines I believe can only hold 60 to 200 titles, they absolutely wipe the floor with everyone else on price and location. No store costs, no warehouses, no warehouse staff, and they could set up in tiny spaces with a great amount of footfall. And that's how they rent you a DVD for $1 a night, while stocking the high demand titles that were most of what Blockbuster wanted. As you can see from all of this, Blockbuster was superior to each of these companies in multiple ways and able to outcompete them on certain terms, but it was also inferior to them in other ways. And they're all taking business of each other, so you can't exactly point to any one of them individually and say, that's a one officer, that's the company that took down Blockbuster. It might be easy to tell it that way, but it's just not true. Just like we couldn't point to any one corporate decision and say that is the one that dealt the fatal blow, it's not going to happen. They all did damage, they all hurt Blockbuster financially. However, having said all that, there is one singular cause that I personally would probably point to and say that is what killed Blockbuster, but we're going to save it for the next and final shift, where we'll talk about the final days of Blockbuster. For now, I want to look at a different external factor, something that probably people wouldn't consider because it's not a rival corporation, it's not a technology, it's not a policy, it is ephemeral. It's the process of mass and scale. Yeah, we're kind of Samuel T. Francis posting here, why not? So I know we're all familiar with the concept of supply and demand and of scarcity driving value. I've talked about it a fair lot, it's commonly known. But I want you to think about that principle now, not in economic terms, but in emotional terms, in psychological terms. During Blockbuster's best days, being able to watch a movie in the comfort of your own home, that was a luxury, that was a high status activity, and video rental gave you a taste of that luxury that was previously never available. The branding, the slogans of Blockbuster, they speak to this. Make it a Blockbuster night is positioning video rental as a treat, as a special occasion. But, well, when movies are available for $3 in a bargain bin in a Walmart, or you can just buy them like a Kit Kat from a vending machine, or even they're just kind of clutter in your home because, well, they're so cheap and ubiquitously available. Well, emotionally, the value of them goes down. You stop seeing them as special. Why make it a special occasion when it's kind of quotidien? You start to think, if a movie just isn't that special anymore, well, is it worth making a special effort for it? Is it worth driving out to Blockbuster for it? That sort of thing, it has a psychological impact, which I think is very important to Blockbuster's downfall. Now I'm going to end this with the end of an era in Blockbuster's history. That is the departure of John the Horse Guy Antioco. Now, most of the damaging decisions around promotions and handling competition were made by him, and in May 2004, Viacom had started unloading their Blockbuster stock, wary of incoming financial disaster. Not a good sign. Antioco presented this as a good thing. He said Blockbuster would now be independent and free to pursue whatever the next big idea would bring success. And John the Horse Guy Antioco decided that the best way to communicate this was in a company retreat on a weekend in Las Vegas, having execs and franchise owners driven out to the desert in coaches at 4 a.m. This happened. Mystified, they found themselves directed to a sea of chairs that were facing this big empty screen. And while they were wondering what the heck is going on, out in the desert at 4 a.m., at 5:30 a.m., alongside the sunrise, John Antioco rides in on a horse to the tune of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. He wanted to make a big impression on the audience. It was a new dawn, you see. It was a new dawn for Blockbuster. Like the cowboys of old, there's a wide land of opportunity out ahead of them. And I personally would not have tried to make that point by pointing to a very outdated genre that was basically dead at the time. I think that would be a mixed message, but that's just me. But as you can see, that turnaround never came, and John Antioco left Blockbuster acrimoniously in 2007. And the appointment of the next CEO just confirmed that Blockbuster was doomed. Michael Keyes is not someone I'm going to go into any detail about, because all he did was follow on from Antioco's previous strategies. Just keep expanding, keep accumulating the debt, and keep trying to beat your competition with a war of attrition. And you know exactly how well that went. You can see it. So I'm not going to cover his sort of doubling down on the total access scheme. We've already talked about it. Once again, you can just see the franchisees were not listened to. And Alan Payne has a really interesting story about this. He tells a story about being invited on the Blockbuster company jet in order to make his case to John Antioco himself during a long flight. And this was something that he thought really could turn things around. He had been actively campaigning to put forward the franchisees' perspective for years. He was on the board of franchisees. He was constantly trying to talk to the execs to try and turn them around on bad strategies, show them what was working, present them with the data so that they would make a better decision. And so being invited on this jet to make the presentation to Antioco himself, he prepped it, he got a really good presentation together and made a hard sell during the long flight. And Antioco, listened to him. But after that flight, when Antioco carried on and Payne went back to his stores, well, none of his plans were implemented. And Alan Payne was just once again very disappointed, but felt, hey, at least I was listened to, at least I was given a fair hearing. But that frustration and sadness turned into absolute dejection and cynicism when a friend of his pointed out that actually John Antioco probably never intended to listen to him in the first place, never intended to follow up on any of his ideas, but brought Payne on board the company jet so that he could write the use off as a business meeting while he went on to his fishing holiday. Yeah, I think that's probably enough sort of depressing, cynical weirdness for tonight. I think we leave it here for this shift. The next shift is going to be the final one in this series, and we're going to talk about how Blockbuster died, the final days of it. We're going to pull one out for our home movies, and I'll tell you about those final days. And maybe there'll even be a cheeky bit of proselytizing and radicalization thrown in, who knows. But for now, fancy something kind of cozy. Let's kick back with a good horror movie that I will talk all the way through, as ever. Join me for that. Thanks, y'all. Tschüss.